Too many people feel that they are not called. Too many people wonder why they are on Earth. And as a professor, having served such for many, many, many years now, it is very clear to me that I cannot be you and you cannot be me. We each have to run in our own Olympic lanes.
Edwin Powell Hubble once said, "Astronomy is something like the ministry. No one should go into it without a call." And my guest today, Professor David Block, is a man who has had a call in both sides, both to astronomy and to the ministry as well. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Keenan. It's lovely to be with you. And yes, I think you've summed it up so well. Astronomy is a calling. You know, I think of the Olympic Games, and I think of the fact that when there's, for example, a race, everybody runs in his or her lane. And I think that my advice to your listeners, to students globally, is that it is terribly important to continue to only run in your God-given lane. Too many people fail. Too many people are frustrated. Too many people feel that they are not called. Too many people wonder why they are on Earth. And as a professor, having served such for many, many, many years now, it is very clear to me that I cannot be you and you cannot be me. We each have to run in our own Olympic lanes. God gave me this calling, let me see, in 1969 already, the calling to become an astronomer. And that's been my calling ever since. And that's wonderful. In the year 1969, I would have been 15. And I remember my father, uh, was so encouraging. I was listening on the radio to astronomical events, and on the radio they said that there was this incredible comet, and we were urged to get up at 4:30 a.m. to look at it, and we did, and I did, and I just saw this incredible comet with its blazing head and tail, and I was just so enamored by it all that that really was my passion and my entrance into astronomy.
What exactly does an astronomer do?
There are many different types. It's a very interesting question. There are many different types of careers within astronomy, just like in medicine. Some might specialize in the inner ear, some might be neurologists, some might be orthopedic surgeons, some might do ear, nose, and throat. So there are many specialities within medicine. And in astronomy, there are many, many, many branches too. I mean, you can do astronomy, you can do astrophysics, you can do cosmology, which is studying the birth and the death of the universe from a mathematical point of view. And then, even in astronomy, in pure astronomy, you might devote your whole life to studying galaxies, or to studying planets, or to studying asteroids. There are myriads of different fields in which you can specialize under the umbrella of astronomy, just like there are myriads of specialists in the medical profession who might, the one decides to investigate the workings of the eye and the other of the ear. So on the other of the fingers and so on. So there are many, many disciplines within the broad umbrella of astronomy, but astronomy is really a very up and coming branch of science. It's exceedingly interesting and exceedingly complex, and I look forward to your questions in that regard.
When you say it's up and coming, what do you mean exactly? Because in my mind, it seems like something that's been around for some time. You know, if you go back all the way to the Renaissance, Galileo, Da Vinci, they were really fascinated by it.
They were, but what I mean by up and coming is really up and coming for South Africans. Um, South Africa, of course, is one of the hosts, the major host of the SKA, which is the Square Kilometre Array, which is a massive set of radio dishes or radio telescopes in the Cape. And because of that fact that we are an international partner, a pivotal partner of the Square Kilometre Array, it means that there are many, many fellowships available for people in astronomy who might study astronomy, say at WITS or at UCT or elsewhere, and then they want to start getting some practical experience. When I was your age, one had to go overseas. You know, I had to go to Hawaii, for example. I had to go to Harvard. I had to go to Chile, but not in South Africa. There was very, very little future for me to do any observations in my field of infrared astronomy from Johannesburg. And so by up and coming, I really mean that for South Africans, and especially young South Africans, if folk Google SKA or the Square Kilometre Array, they'll find that there are many fellowships available for those who have qualified and say want to do their master's or their doctoral degree. And so it's a very up and coming field. And, you know, not only that, but there's a radio telescope which will soon see operation in a year or two in Namibia. So Southern Africa is really on the move in terms of especially radio astronomy. It's been on the move for many, many decades in terms of optical astronomy, but not so many fellowships available, certainly when I was a student. But now there are myriads of, I would think, support bases here in astronomy. And I think it's an ideal time for folk who are interested in it to Google undergraduate degrees, say Astronomy University of Cape Town, for example. I suppose I suppose largely political. You know, we did track radio astronomers did track the moon landing in 1969, but because of the politics of the day in 1969, NASA really downscaled the operations of the radio telescope at Hartebeespoort. Um, I think South Africa over the years has become a far more friendly place internationally. And I think that because of that, overseas investors are rather keen to exploit the fact that we have great skies. We really do, you know, especially in Sutherland and some where they've got the SAAO, the South African Astronomical Observatory, with a suite of telescopes in Sutherland. So I think that international investing has taken place, is taking place. The Square Kilometre Array attests to this, that, you know, I don't know how many millions of euros has been poured in to the development of the Square Kilometre Array. So I suppose in a nutshell, it's being at the right place at the right time, being in the right country at the right time. And certainly, I mean, when I was your age, as I say, I had to, when I got my doctorate, for example, the only career forward was to fly, for example, to Munich and then to fly to Chile to use the great telescopes in the Atacama Desert in Chile. South Africa was kind of on the back foot in terms of being at the cutting edge, but that is gradually changing. although so much work now, as I'm seated talking to you, so much work is being done from space.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot that goes beyond just what you can do, because I imagine something like any telescope requires a lot of investment. Firstly, it requires a big team to man it, um, to operate it as well. It's not something that one person can just wake up one day and decide, you know what, I'm gonna build the best telescope in Southern Africa, one that can compete on the international stage all on their own. No.
No, no, no. No, no, I mean, it's not only the monetary side, which is one thing, but you've got to select the correct sites. You want to be in areas which don't suffer from a huge amount of cloud cover, as far as optical and infrared astronomy goes. If you've got a lot of cloud cover, of course, you're not going to be able to see the stars or the galaxies. uh, doesn't really matter for radio telescopes, but for infrared observations and optical observation, like to see the sky, yes, you need the right place, but you also need the right team. You know, even if you've got the right money, the right amount of money, you need the correct team, you need engineers. Astronomy has become a very, very sophisticated domain in terms of that. The world's largest telescopes, your listeners might like to Google telescopes in the Atacama Desert, and they'll see they are gargantuan. You know, in Hawaii, with the Keck telescopes, a human being is just a tiny, tiny little matchstick almost against the huge frame of these telescopes. And it's become, it's no longer the idea of, you know, David Block carrying out in a telescope at night and looking up. These are vast, vast undertakings, costing millions and hundreds of millions of euros and more, manned by some of the world's best engineers. And so when I go to observe, if I was going to observe, say, in the Atacama Desert, there are whole hosts of people one has to work with. But just getting those things erected takes huge amounts of time and expertise.
Yeah, and I imagine all of that it takes. People will also question why invest all of this into, looking out there when there's a lot of problems here. What value does astronomy have?
I think that's a lovely question, and I think that people around the world would ask me, Professor Block, where do I come from? What am I doing here? What is my purpose? Where am I going? And I think that the universe gives one a beautiful place to try and answer those questions. Certainly, I have got scriptural and biblical answers for them. But the point is, in Psalm 19, I believe, we read, the heavens declare the glory of God. And so the heavens serve as a direct interface between God's glory and ourselves, Kenan and David. And so if you look at the heavens like I did, I started realizing very early on, just hang on a second, the heavens are not accidental, but the heavens are designed. They're absolutely exquisitely designed by our masterful Lord and Creator. And so that was the marriage between the macrocosm, David Block, and the microcosm. So the macrocosm, the galaxies, and the microcosm, David Block. So I believe that as you look up at the universe, you ask questions. What am I doing here? Why am I here? Is there a purpose to me being here? Is there a God? Is there a creator? And astronomy can serve as a wondrous, wondrous stepping stone in that regard. Certainly for me it did in 1976 when I came to a very deep faith in God. Uh, that was because astronomy had really lit my candle. So I would say that astronomy really serves as a wonderful interface, you know, between the big and the small, between purpose, between design, between us simply being here apparently as a random accident or not. And so I think astronomy has got a pivotal place to play. You know, too few people today, Keenan, are looking up. They are looking down, they're looking at the world, they're looking at terrible evils in the world, They're looking at mass murders and mass wars and so on and so on and so on. To me, I see a different world up there when I look up. And to me, it's part of it is anyway to observe the glory of God. It really is in a very true sense of the word.
Yeah, and the world can definitely be a cruel place. When you look at things going on around us, the wars that are going on, you look in history and you look at all the suffering people went through. And, one of my favorite books, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, one of the things he said that to help people survive, it was that they had a reason to survive. He who knows why can pay anyhow. And it's having that sense that all of this that I'm going through has meaning. And bringing it back to the quote at the start, that astronomy is something that you should have a calling for. If I look at other professions versus astronomy, it's purely in that sense of curiosity and seeking answers out there. It's not a quantifiable metric, something that you can say, let's say with you go into a profession to make money, then okay, my aim is to make money to live XYZ. But astronomy, it's looking for answers. It's not focused on what you're going to get out of it from a monetary aspect.
No, that's right. That's right. I mean, I don't think any astronomers are in this game for money. I certainly am not. I think that over all the many years since I came to be an astronomer in the early days, 1969, when my interest in astronomy was ignited, I never had my eye on the money. My father took me for tests when I was your age, and the folk who conducted the test said, "Well, your son must go into the realm of being an actuary. He's gifted. He's highly gifted in that area." Well, as it turns out, I am a professor, an emeritus professor of applied mathematics, and actuarial science almost falls into that discipline. But I would have missed out of tens of thousands and more of young minds and young students whom I've lectured to over the years, since I started lecturing I guess, I started lecturing in 1976 at UCT already. So it's a long, long, long time ago. And it goes back to this, was I going to be an actuary and earn lots of money? Or was God calling me into a different lane, a different Olympic lane? And certainly God was not calling me into the lane of actuarial science. Doesn't mean to say that there are not brilliant Olympic runners in the field of actuarial science. Of course there are. But the point really is that my God-given lane was to help others look up. And I'm so glad over all these years, students meet me in the streets, students meet me wherever they might be, and they say, Professor Block, you helped me to look up. I'll never forget your lectures. And that's the question you raised earlier of Viktor Frankl, and meaning and purpose is that astronomy was the catalyst in me meeting God and so giving me purpose and so forth. And actuarial science was not going to give me any of that. So my specific God-given lane has always been in the realm of helping others to behold the beauties in the night sky.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing that you went down the path you went, because there's also the other side I could see happening is because you were so good at maths and that sort of stuff. If you had gone into actual science, you would have believed that that is your calling. You would have had an aptitude for it. But then there's a whole side that you do not see, you're not aware of, that there's this thing that if you had taken a shot on it, you'd see this is exactly where my passion lies. You wouldn't see this world of astronomy that you have now.
I think that's right. I think that, one must not run after the money. I think I've always said that to people is that follow your passion. So if your passion is to become an expert in how the brain works, then follow that passion. If your passion is to find out how the hand works, then follow that passion. If your passion is to understand the uniqueness and the beauty and the awe and the wonder of our universe, then follow that. Money is a very small factor, really, in one's total career because you spend so many hours of the day. I mean, we sleep what for 6, 8 hours, and we've got 24. So the rest of our time is spent on our jobs, really, or largely on our jobs, at least 8 hours, sometimes 10, sometimes 12 if they're doctors and so on. And you better be very sure, that you're actually passionately in love with your chosen career, because otherwise you come across so many people who are just dissatisfied with life, and they're not really dissatisfied with life, they're dissatisfied with their choices in life. They've made the wrong choices. And I think the beauty with me is I could seek God. God sought me out, and He set me on a very wonderful path. And yep, astronomers are not driving Rolls Royces, but that's irrelevant, At the end of the day, when I now look back as an emeritus professor in applied maths, what's very important to me is I still continue. I'm director of a ministry called Reasons to Believe Africa. I'm still helping people to meet God. Thank God for that. And I'm still helping people to look up, and I'm still helping people to get rid of depression and fear and angst and a lack of meaning. The book you quoted earlier, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And so that's the hat I currently wear as director of Reasons to Believe Africa, which is a wonderful ministry birthed out of California, to give people a reason or reasons to believe in a personal God. And that's just awesome. And that's the most incredible Olympic rail lane to run in.
Yeah, and I think it's a big thing to consider. Like, what are you optimizing for? Um, there's the risk that you can run where you optimize for making money in the short term, but then ultimately the money is meant to be a vehicle for your happiness in life, for satisfaction. So if you can circumvent that whole step of getting into a rat race just to keep up with the Joneses, why not look for a way out of it? And in spite of whatever field anybody decides to pursue, whatever lane they decide to, whatever lane they feel is meant for them, it's always going to be challenging. It's not that you found your calling, you found what you're passionate about, and you don't have to put in a lot of work. Everything's going to be smooth sailing. There's always going to be obstacles. And having that passion for something gives you that fuel to overcome whatever obstacles you face, because you have a reason to overcome those obstacles. It's the difference between wandering in a forest lost versus running an obstacle course.
I've often said, actually, it might sound silly or might not, it might sound trite, but it's not. I've always said, if people have asked me, have I worked hard? I say, I haven't worked a day in my life. And the reason is, I worked very hard as a student to get a first class distinction in applied maths, honors, and so on. But what I'm trying to say is, it was such fun in studying so hard that I didn't notice the time. I think that as I look back at my studying, I worked very, very seriously hard. I would work outside of university hours for many, many evenings, perhaps deep into the midnight hours. But by not working at all, I mean, it's not that it just all comes naturally. It doesn't. But if you really love something, like if you really enjoy playing golf, and you play golf, you don't notice how many weeks you're on the golf course, right? Because you love it. And my late mother, was a pianist, and she would just spend days and weeks playing on the piano. She never noticed it because it was her passion. If you're a great tennis player, right? You play and play and play and you practice. It's hard work, but it's not really hard work because they love doing what they are doing. I mean, ask somebody like Ernie Els. You read about him; he just loves playing golf, and so yeah, it's very hard work. Practice, 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 but you don't notice it because it's fun.
Yeah, that's something I found fascinating when they looked at players. I think it was with Neymar. They put the BCI device on his head to see his brainwaves. And the weird phenomenon they found was when he was most in tune, like playing his best, his brain showed very little activity. You know, it's like he sort of hit a sweet spot where when he starts training and starts moving about, there's a lot of activation. But as he gets into his stride, it goes down and down and down, and it seems more instinctual. Um, and in terms of your journey into becoming an astronomer, how did you actually, become an astronomer, especially with the climate of South Africa where astronomy wasn't a big focus? How did you get into that career?
Well, I started by enrolling for a Bachelor of Science degree at the University of the Witwatersrand, Wits. I enrolled because I knew I needed applied mathematics to study the night skies. Applied mathematics means taking mathematics and applying it to the real world. So, in my case, taking mathematics and applying it to astronomy. And so I enrolled for my Bachelor of Science degree in applied maths. Then I did my Bachelor of Science honors degree. During that time, during those years, I wrote my first paper. I was so pleased. My very first research paper on relativistic astrophysics was published at the age of 20. I wrote it when I was 19 years old. But the point really was that I was so steeped in general relativity, in cosmology, in astronomy, and all that, that I did my BSc and my BSc honors. I then did my master's degree. Then I moved to Cape Town to do my doctoral degree at the University of Cape Town, where they have the South African Astronomical Observatory. And after that, yes, I mean, South Africa was not on the front foot in terms of astronomy, but I was awarded fellowships, like I was awarded the British Council Fellowship. I was to study anywhere in the UK. I was awarded the University Council Fellowship to go anywhere in the world and study there, flights all paid for and so on. So, yeah, I suppose I laid the foundation, or God laid the foundation very deeply so, in Johannesburg and at UCT. But after that, there were fellowships available, scholarships available to travel abroad. I spent time in Germany. I spent time in Hawaii at the Institute for Astronomy in Hawaii, where they have some of the world's biggest telescopes on the island, the big island. It's called the Mauna Kea Observatories. So, in other words, I did my basic foundational course here. Always I tell my students, you don't build a house from the top down, you build it from the bottom up. So, you've got to lay the foundation. So, the foundation was a BSc and a BSc Honours and an MSc, which one could easily do in South Africa, easily. Then, when it came to later on to one's doctorate, I decided, okay, I'll go up to doctorate level and do my doctorate in South Africa, but then I would travel. And I did, and I never looked back.
Okay, and for somebody that's looking to go into astronomy now, how would their path look compared to, the one that you've gone on?
I think much the same. One still has to do a BSc and a BSc honors and a Master of Science degree and a doctorate. That hasn't changed. I'm just saying that perhaps it's become perhaps a little more easy to stay in South Africa if you want to do astronomy per se. But as far as the foundational work is concerned, it's just like medicine. What do you need to become a doctor? Well, you need to study and work your community service, but it's really a 7 year commitment, right? And if you want to become a doctor, you can go to UCT, or you can go to Rhodes, or you could go to, I don't know, there's just so many universities with faculties of medicine. But the point is, you have to do that. If you want to become a GP, you have to do medicine, and you have to do your basic degree. And it's just like that in astronomy. There's no shortcut. There's no shortcut. Many of my students wished there was, but there isn't. Bachelor of Science is 3 years still, and Honours is 1 year, that's 4 years. A Master's is 1 or 2 years, and then a doctorate is about 3 or 4 years more. So it's a long path, but it's just like golf. If you loved golf or if you love medicine, you'll gladly do it.
Yeah, and I think also with the path, I had a conversation with a friend recently who just completed his PhD, and he said one of the most valuable things for him, it wasn't all the stuff he learned along the way, it's the person you become, where you actively engaged with what you enjoy, and you start seeing different sides of yourself. You start seeing, you know, things that you would have not thought about yourself from before. And especially if, say, somebody decides they want to go into astronomy with all the different fields, you won't be able to say from your first day studying, hey, I want to study cosmic dust and just cosmic dust. No, it's as you do, you start seeing, okay, this is what that is. There's more to this. Um, maybe cosmic dust isn't for me. Maybe I want to do relativist astrophysics. And then even in that itself, there's different branches, there's different theories, there's different takes on it. There's nuances. And yeah, throughout your career, I imagine you also look at different things where when you start, you think this is where I'm meant to be. And then as you move on, your focus shifts away from that. And, looking at your career now, where you've now um, focused on ministry side of things, that signifies that as well. Where initially when you started studying, I don't think you thought you would be going about the world preaching the beauty of God and that people must look up.
No, no. I think that's right. In 1976, I had a very close and very, very deep and very personal encounter with the Lord. Um, it became very clear to me that Jesus was the way, the truth, and the life. And it became wonderfully clear to me that He was my shepherd. He was the shepherd of the psalmist David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And I can say that today, the Lord is Dave Block's shepherd, I shall not want. And in those days, of course, I could never have dreamt that I would address. I do not know how many people I've addressed in my lifetime. It must be some staggering amount. I mean, just in terms of students, I had 500 students a week at WITS. That's excluding ministry. And then in ministry, you might have a church with 300 people sometimes, or some of my biggest audiences were like 8,000 people at Rhema. So I've preached to huge crowds, and I don't think I would have ever have dreamt that would have even been a remotest possibility. But nothing gives me greater joy, to know that I'm reaching the hearts of people, not only reaching the mindsets of people, but reaching the hearts of people. And it's a glorious calling now to be able to share the wonders, for example, of the James Webb Space Telescope with people around the world. I've just been with my wife in Namibia preaching. We've been in Kenya preaching. As director of Reasons to Believe Africa, we are heading for Chile in South America. Our one twin son, Nathaniel, and I are flying to Chile to preach there, to speak at 2 conferences, to preach, to talk about the wonders of astronomy and space science and the James Webb Space Telescope and so on. So yeah, that is something I would never ever have thought was possible. But it's all weaved together, Following God's calling, the flame of astronomy is lit. He then reveals himself to me in a very intimate way in 1976 when I was 22, and since then has guided my career very, very directly so.
Yeah, something I've noticed with a lot of astronomers in particular is, or people that look at, astrophysics, is they seem to be on either end of the spectrum. Either they see all of this and it gives them a sense and affirmation that God truly exists. If I look at history, like Isaac Newton, Johannes Kepler, Galileo Galilei, Michael Faraday, they were all devout Christians. And then in the opposite end of the spectrum, you have people like Stephen Hawking, Carl Sagan, who are extreme atheists, and they view all of this mystery and wonder as justification that there can't be a God. Why do you think that's the case?
It's a matter of choice. I can choose to switch off the lights and and live in darkness, or I can choose to switch on the lights and live in the light. I chose when God showed me that He is real and that exists. It's like all the light switches came on, but I was willing. That's the point. I was willing to open my eyes to the light. I was willing. But if you want to stay in darkness, God will never force your hand. I think that's the awesomeness of free will, is that one can take. Well, if this is a pencil, you can use this pencil and stab somebody with its point, or take somebody's eye out, or you can use it to write the most gorgeous maths or poetry. It's a choice. And so, as I say, you can choose to be in the light, to walk in the light, or you can choose to walk in the darkness. It's a choice each one of us make. Jesus says, unless a man is born again, this time of the Spirit, he cannot see the kingdom of God. So it's a question of being born again. It's a question of having one's eyes open to another world, not just the material world, but the world of the Spirit. And I think that's what I'd like to sort of concentrate on in our last 15 minutes is the fact that God's world is a very different world, to the world of the material world, what we see. Stephen Hawking chose to remain in his world of darkness, which is tragic. But God will not stop that. Just like God will not stop me if I want to sit in darkness, spiritual darkness. He'll say, David, you can. If I want to walk in fellowship with him, he'll say, welcome. Welcome home. Welcome, my son. And he'll come running towards me, as in the prodigal son, the parable of the prodigal son. The father runs to the son, and so forth. But it's a matter of choice. That's what I really believe. It's a matter of choice, is that Jesus' love extends to all. We read in John 3:16, for God so loved the world, right? Everybody. He so loved everybody that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. So, but whosoever believes in him, that's a choice. I can choose to walk out of this room into light, as I've said. I can choose to walk out of my studio here in South Africa into darkness, and that's part. But God has revealed Himself to me in that very intimate way, and so I look upon this as almost using binocular vision. Is the one world of astronomy, and the other eye is the spiritual eye. And I think to be a creative scientist today, well, certainly for me, the way forward is to use the astronomy eye, to use the world of the spirit, to keep that eye fully open, and God leads us with that binocular vision.
Yeah, I think also your journey is also fascinating to see in that sense, because you were not born Christian or raised Christian. It wasn't, something you grew accustomed to in your household, you converted from being Jewish to Christian. Can you tell us about that, transition?
I still believe, of course, that I'm fully Jewish. I really do. When Jesus was crucified, he was crucified as King of the Jews. That was the sign above his head, King of the Jews. Jesus never did away with Judaism. Jesus said he's come to fulfill the law and the prophets, not to do away with them. So, yes, I was raised in an Orthodox Jewish home. But when I came to the faith in the Messiah in 1976, I was 22. It was like all spiritual lights were opened, and suddenly I was blind, but then suddenly I could see. I could see his love, I could see his grace, I could see his truth as a Jew. And as I sit here today in South Africa talking to you, I know that there's Jewish blood flowing in my brains. And so I think it's very wrong to say, it is extremely wrong, in fact, to say that a Jew cannot be a believer in Jesus. It's not like you've got Judaism, and then if you become a follower of Jesus, Judaism falls away. No, you become a completed Jew. You become a completed spiritual being in Him. Jesus is fully Jewish. He came to fulfill the Jewish laws. I can proudly say that my Savior is fully Jewish. So, in following him, I've never denied him as the Jewish Messiah. It's sort of, it's like longing for a cherry on top of a cake. And you look and you look and you look, and then suddenly you find the cherry. Jesus spoke of it that way. He said, a man is seeking and suddenly finds a pearl of untold worth, untold price, and then he goes and he sells all that he has to buy that pearl. Thank God the pearl, Jesus himself, is free. But what I mean is there's a cost involved. There's a huge cost involved in following Jesus. It's not a walk in the park to follow Jesus. He instructs us very clearly so to forgive others, to love others. And sometimes others will betray us, and forgiveness might not be that easy. Viktor Frankl, you mentioned again, a man's search for meaning. It's not that easy sometimes for some of my Jewish people to forgive those who have murdered 6 million of our people. It's not easy, but it can be done. I think of Auschwitz survivors like Edith Eger, who go around the world preaching forgiveness. Or otherwise, she says that the greatest concentration camp is not at Auschwitz, but in your own mind. And I know that to be true. The greatest concentration camp can be in our own minds and mindsets. And so Jesus is a master, the master, neurologist, if you like, at unlocking our mindsets and giving us mindsets of love and joy and forgiveness. And yeah, and that's how I've walked ever since 1976. To sort of tie up your question in a little circle, um, fully Jewish, following the Jewish Messiah. The teachings of Jesus are so Jewish in every single respect. Loving your neighbor, following the 10 Commandments, all of that summed up in one. Love your neighbor as yourself, love one another, washing one another's feet. I do want to say that if we did wash one another's feet, I think there'd be far less war in the world. I don't think that happens nearly enough today. As Jesus actually instructs us in the New Testament, to wash each other's feet, literally, not figuratively. And I think that if people had the humility to sort of bow down and serve one another in humility, there'd be far less war and hate that characterizes our globe.
What's it? The quote by Nelson Mandela, or no, Martin Luther King. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can. Light cannot drive out, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor David Block. If people want to follow your work, see what you're up to now. Where can I go?
So there are, my personal website is www.davidblock, DAVIDBLOCK, .co.za. That's my personal website. And then there's Reasons to Believe Africa. Um, I think if you just Google Reasons to Believe Africa, you'll find another website which contains a lot of apologetic works. In other words, how can a creative scientist believe in an old universe, for example? Or how can a committed Christian believe that the universe is billions of years old? So, Reasons to Believe Africa website is one way of reaching what I do. And the other, my personal website, www.davidblock.co.za, provides a platform in which people like Keenan could reach me directly and in which others can reach me directly as well. But it's been such a joy chatting, Keenan, and I trust that your listeners will have secured a little glimpse of what it entails to become astronomer. But moreover, I think my message in this interview has been what it entails to run in your Olympic lane. That's the key message today is find the lane that God wants you to run in. Don't look to money, but find the lane that the Lord would have you run in and then run in that lane. And that's what I've been doing ever since I was 15, is I've been running in that lane that God has given me. And God alone has opened incredible doors, Keenan, in the Chilean telescopes, the telescopes in Hawaii, and so on. And God has done all the rest, but I need to continually be focused, very rigidly so, on my lane.
Yeah, and I think if you're in your lane, there's no ways you can lose. If you're the only one running the race that you can run, you're your own competition.
Mm.
There's no way you can lose at all. Thank you so much for being a guest today. Really appreciate it. Have a
Thank you,
good day.
Keenan.
Cheers.